This is my Ruby and Sinatra application. So what I do first is I run my terminal, I open up my project. My project is called Manifest This. This gives me access to Visual Studio Code. From here I can view my controllers, my models, my views, my config folder, my database, my spec, my config.ru, which is my rackup file, my gem file, gemlock, and my rake file. So I start at the bottom, my rake file. So it requires my environment and it requires my rake. What the task console do is it allows me to test my models from my database. So I have that as an option while I was building out my project. I have my gem file. Here I require all of the gems necessary to make my application. On line 12 I have my bcrypt, which allows me to encrypt my passwords so that users can access and change them, and it also scrambles my passwords. Right here I have my config.ru file, which allows me to load my Sinatra library. It requires my controllers, different application controllers, and allows me to run my application. I have my on line 3 used rack method override, which allows me to request a method that is a non-supported method. So I have that on line 3. In my spec file, I have my spec file for my application, and I just have a spec helper here that came when I downloaded my the gem to build out my project. I have a seed file. I don't have any, well, I do have seed information just as a filler. I have my schema, which allows me to see the tables that I've created. I have my dreams table and my users table. Right here in my migrate folder, I can see how I created those files. My dreams table has a title, content, entry date, and user ID, and my users table has a username and password digest. Here in my migrate file, I see that my class create users my active record migration is pushed into my create users. So each user has a username and password, and my dreams, which are the manifestations in my project, each have a title, they have text, which is content, they have an entry date, and they are connected to the user who created them. In my environment folder, I have the connection between active record and the base, which creates a link between Ruby and my databases. So I have that here in my environment folder. And then right above that I have my application folder. So I have my controllers, my models, and my views. My views are the front-end user-facing web application, which contains the only parts of my application that the user interacts with. It holds my embedded Ruby files, which I created some for dreams. So in my dreams embedded Ruby files, on my views folder, I can create a new dream. I can see the index as well as show all of the manifestations, and I can edit a specific dream. I have one also for my users, so I can create a new user and it allows returning users to log in. I have a file for my error message, an index, which is just what my application can open up to, a layout that came pre-made, but I customized it to fit my needs, and I have a reused embedded Ruby file, which I use in my application. So that is my views. It sends requests from the front end, so the client or user, to my back end, which is my models. I'll speak more about that. So that is what is in my views file. I have my models file, which hold my dream class and my user class. Because I created a dreams and a users table, they require a model for each table that I've created. So in my class, for my users. It inherits active record base. So every user has many dreams. They create manifestations. So that is something within this class. I also have the active record method has secure password, which allows me to create the user to create a password that I, as the application maker, don't have access to because it gets scrambled. And I have a method called validates the uniqueness of, which is usernames, which allows a user to create a username and ensures that that specific username cannot be used twice. So that was really handy for me, and that was an active record method. So I have my macros has many because the user has many. The models in this application are the back end. They connect to my database, which are the tables that I created, and they store every single instance of the new user and dream that they created. So my models is basically the data of my project, and it is the back end of my project. So my class dream, the dream, which is the manifestation, belongs to the user who created them. So here I have the active record macro belongs to. Here I have my controller. My controller is right in between my models and views. It is what allows my user to have access to my database and controls the flow of the application. So I can show you my application controller right here. I have different methods. So here I have my get, which gets a backslash, and it redirects the user to my embedded Ruby file index, which is just a welcome page. I have my helper methods, which allow me to view, which are views that I can access in different places of my project. So I have a method called logged in, which sees if the current user is equal to the person logged in. I also have a current user, which uses memoization to find the user by the ID, which is the session user's ID. And then I have another method called not logged in. So if the user is not logged in, it will redirect them to log in. I have this all in my applications controller. Right here I have my dream controller. So here I use the 7 HTTP verbs, which are hypertext transfer protocol verbs, which allow me to have different actions in my application. And my first action is to get all my dreams. So that is line 3 through 6. I have an instance variable called dreams, which is set equal to dream.all, which returns all of the dreams, which are from me, manifestations, and it renders the view file, so it stays in the request of my dreams index embedded Ruby file. So here in views, we can go to the dreams and open up index, so it will open up every single manifestation that was created. So that was line 3 through 6. Line 8 through 11 is get dreams new. So if we go to views, dreams new is a form which allows the user to create a new manifestation. They create the title, their content, and the date they want to complete it by. So that embedded Ruby file opens up right here. Before that, on line 9, I have a method called not logged in. I defined not logged in my application controller, so if the user is not logged in, it will redirect them to log in, because I don't want the users to have access to create new manifestations if they are not recognized by the database. On line 13 through 17, I have my get dreams ID, which allows me to see a specific dream that was created by their ID. I also have, again, the method not logged in on line 14. So if the user is not logged in, I don't want them to have access to dreams/1 or dreams/5 because I don't want them to access it without making an account. On line 15, I have my instance variable, which is set equal to dream.find with the params of the specific dream's ID. From there, it will open up to dreams/show, so it's the file that allows it. And once the user is able to see that, they see the title of the manifestation, the goal date that the user wants to complete it by, and the content. The user also has the option of going back to the home page, and here I have a block. So if the dream user is set equal to the current user, they have access to edit it and delete it. I wanted to make sure that the user does not have access to edit somebody else's information or to delete it if they are not the user who created it. So I have that in place there to ensure that nobody can do that. Lines 19 through 24, post dreams do, allows me to create the specific dream that was made and save it in the database. So if the user is not logged in on line 20, again, the user will be redirected to log in because we don't want them to be able to make a manifestation and post it to the database without having a user associated. I have my instance variable again, and if it is set equal to the current user that created the dreams, and it will build its params. If it is, then it will save that specific dream, and it will redirect the user to the dreams link. So redirect is another route that the user can access after the application has already applied the changes. So after the new dream is posted into the database and saved there, then redirect allows me to view that dreams link. From lines 26 to 30, I get dreams with the ID and edit. What that allows me to do is view and edit one specific dream. So I have an instance variable called dream that is set equal to dream.find, which allows me to find a specific ID of the dream with taking into account the params, which is a hash with the key value pairs. So I'm able to access that specific dream, and I call redirect unknown user on line 28. What that does is a private method right here. If the dream user is not equal to the current user, the user will be redirected to dreams. So what that does for me is that if a user has tries to edit a manifestation that does not belong to them, then they will be redirected because I don't want a stranger to be able to edit somebody else's manifestation. And this takes in the embedded Ruby file of dreams to edit. So in my views, I can go to dreams edit right here. And this title with the form allows me to edit the specific dream ID with the dream title, entry date, and content. Okay, so next on line 32 through 37, I have patch dreams ID, which allows me to update and modify the specific dream post in my database. So again, I have an instance variable that is set equal to dream.find, the dream with the params of the ID specific to that manifestation post. I have the method redirect unknown user again because I do not want somebody to be able to update someone else's manifestation without the user being allowed to, because that belongs to them. So it would redirect the user to the dreams. And then from there, once it knows that it's the correct user, the current user, and they have access to, it will update the params of the dream post so that it is accurate to what the user wants it to be. And then from there, it will redirect the user to that specific dream ID, the one that they just updated. so they can view the changes they made. Lines 39 through 44, delete, which is the fourth part of CRUD, which is create, which we created a dream. We were able to show the different forms and read those. We were able to update with our patch method on line 32, and then the final step, delete, lines 34 through 39 through 44. Delete dreams ID, so if I wanted to delete dream number 5, it will take into account dream find, a dream with the params of the ID number 5. If the user is not the current user, they do not have access to delete this dream. And then if they do, if the user who's trying to delete the dream is the current user, they have the option to use the destroy method right here on line 42 to destroy that dream, and then after they destroy it, they'll be redirected to the dreams path, which allows users to see all of the dreams. That is how my class dream controller, which is taking into account my application controller functions. That is the steps that this class takes. From here, I will show you my user controller, which my application controller is pushed into. Lines 3 through 5, I'm getting the link /error, which brings up my embedded Ruby file for error. You can read that right here in my views file. It says invalid, please create new username, password. And then here again, I'm just getting my embedded Ruby file for reused, which if you follow right here, username has been taken. That's just what it says. And then I am starting with the content that my user interacts with, my get sign up, and what I want that to do is to take into account my user's new embedded Ruby file. If a new user tries to make an account, I have a form here which allows them to sign up with a username and password. So once the user is able to sign up, I want that to be created in the database. So I have a variable called user, which is set equal to a user new, and the username takes into account the params of username and the params of password. I have a conditional statement, so if the user, and then it finds by username, takes into account params username, they'll be redirected to reuse, which tells the user that their username has been taken already and they have to make a new account. And if that is not an issue and they use a completely new username, the user has the option of saving that ID that the user made, like back end of with their username, is stored in their sessions user ID. And then after that account is stored in the sessions, the user will be redirected to the dreams link, where they'll have access to all of the dreams. I have another method called login, where I go to my embedded Ruby file, users login. Right here, if it's a returning user, the user can sign back into their account. Lines 30 through 39, post login, which allow me to access a user that has already been created. So my instance variable user equals user, find by username with the params username. If the user and the user taking into account the authenticate method, which is a active records method with the params of password, then the session user ID is equal to the user ID, and they'll be redirected to the dreams path, which is access to all the dreams. Else, so the other part of this conditional statement, they are redirected to error because the database doesn't recognize their ID or their password. So there's an error there and they have to sign back in, try to sign back in or create a new account. And then my last, here on line 41 through 44, get/logout do. What I want that to do is to clear this session so that another user can be able to come in, and from there it logs the user out and redirects them to log in if they choose to try to sign in again. And then there's my controller. So my controller is the middleman between my models and my views. So in my views files, you can just see some of the different things I have. An HTML hack that I found is required, which does not allow a user to submit this input without having content there. So if a user tried to submit a username without typing anything, a required field will pop up and will not allow the submission without that. That was very helpful for me. So I have just this application. It's very basic. I have 2 models, I have 3 controllers. I have my views for my manifestations, which use the 7 HTTP routes and CRUD, and then I have my users, which simply have some of the basics in there. And that's my application. At the bottom of this video, I will link a path to my GitHub account.